This episode of the J Podcast is brought to you by nobody. That's right, you heard me, nobody. This is sponsored by me. I'm a rogue, a maverick. Say whatever I want, I guess. If you want to, consider supporting the show at the link down below. But today, we're going to talk about the state of emergency that has been declared in Washington. I'm going to switch over to the desktop here, and if you want to, I encourage you, I really do, to pull all of these links up with me as I go and do it. That way, if you want to debate someone in a public space about vaccines, you will be fully equipped to do so. That is my plan. So, without further ado, this is measles over the course of 5 years. We thought we killed it. You can't kill the metal. The metal will live on. Where was it? Back to a year. Let's go back a page. But as of recently, there's been an uptick in the searches for measles, particularly from the place in which measles are popping up right now. It's not so coincidental that you can Google trend something like this and then see the actual outbreak. So here's the actual news itself. The governor of Washington declared a public health emergency last week after an outbreak of measles. As of Monday, there were 36 confirmed cases in the state. So I actually pulled up the state of emergency here. This is from Governor Jay Inslee, governor of Washington. And we'll just skim over a little bit. They have 26 confirmed cases. They're in the third paragraph. They're just ripping some stuff from it. It goes on to say, the measles vaccine is effective at preventing the disease when given prior to exposure, and proactive steps to provide the vaccination and other measures must be taken quickly to prevent further spread of the disease. Furthermore, the Washington State Department of Health has instituted an infectious disease incident management structure to manage the public health aspects of this incident. This is that bad. The Washington State Military Department State Emergency Operations Center is coordinating resources to support the Department of Health. Yeah, now this is some big stuff here. And there's another thing that has gone on to say, in the Journal of the American Medical Association from 2017, is the incidence of measles in the United States from 2001 to 2015. Read it from the paragraph here. The author, Nakia S. Clemens, looked at measles from that range and how many of the patients had been vaccinated. Clemens, who works in the viral disease division of the CDC, concluded that failure to vaccinate is linked to the spread of measles. So this is the correct use of a cause and an effect here. Science. Usually when you do science, you set out to prove yourself wrong. Maybe you set a null hypothesis, you get a control variable, that sort of thing. So where is this coming from? Why are people not vaccinating? That seems to be the cause of this. They would have good reasons, wouldn't they? Well, there are three main reasons, and we'll pull them up in this PDF here. The first of which has been, and I think it's the main one, propagated by Andrew Wakefield, and it is that the combination of measles, mumps, rubella causes autism by damaging the intestinal lining, which allows the entrance of a specific protein. So, we'll break that one down just in and of itself. They did several studies. No. Let me back up here because there's something really funny going back to basic science. So, guess how many children Andrew Wakefield had when they did their initial study? Just guess. And if you have it on your screen here, you can probably pick out a number and see it. But I'll give it to you. It's 8. You heard me right. That was 8. And the better part of this is out of those 8 kids that they tested during this quote-unquote scientific study, there wasn't a control. And he tested them for autism during the time of life in which you would usually test to see if someone has the genes for autism. Which brings me to my last little bullet point in the matter here. Did I lose it? Bear with me one moment. if you Google search what causes autism, as I would hope this information should be readily available, it'll take you to autismspeaks.org/what causes autism. And it immediately goes into the current thoughts, because this isn't exact. We don't have everything figured out in science. That's kind of how science is. It's progressing constantly. But there are genetic factors that they test for, advanced parent age, birth complications, and then a specific type of birth complications, having them close together. So it's like a developmental thing, clearly, genetic and developmental. We'll close all these extraneous tabs here and go on to bullet point number 2. Thimerosal? Probably saying that wrong. It's the mercury idea that you hear thrown around often. Ethyl mercury containing preservatives in some vaccines is toxic to the central nervous system. So we'll take on that one. Toxic to the central nervous system. So where does that come from? Where we are. I've skimmed a lot of this. You don't have to read it here, but in 1997, there was a couple of mandates to the food and drugs that were administered. And 2 years later, they discovered the 187 micrograms. I was not familiar with the UG. It's a millionth of a gram of mercury within the 6 months could have an effect on the person. They didn't have proof or anything of it being positive or negative, just that it's there and they didn't know if it's positive or negative. So as a preventative measure, they just removed it. This goes on to say, widespread and predictable misinterpretations of this conservative precautionary directive, coupled with a public already concerned by a proposed but unsubstantiated link between vaccinations and autism, understandably provoked concern among parents, which led to the birth of several anti-mercury advocacy groups. So, they go on to say that because of this concern, they did several tests and they didn't find any cause to prove that there was effect. They did, here's an interesting thing. In Denmark, where they found large rates of autism in children who had received 200 micrograms, 125 micrograms or 0 throughout their birth period, and then they removed it, there was no difference. The same amount of autism persisted, regardless of the amount of micrograms of mercury were included. And then the last point, number 3, the simultaneous administration of multiple vaccines overwhelms or weakens the immune system. Go back to the bottom here. Okay, too many vaccines. In summation, they do several tests with actual controls and in large number, not of 8. Goodness gracious. To conclude that vaccines do not overwhelm the immune system, the amount of vaccinations don't weaken the immune system, and furthermore, autism is not an immune-mediated, it's not an immune system disease at all. We just talked about it, and autism is either genetic or a complication at birth at this point, to our understanding. No studies have compared the incidence of autism in vaccinated, unvaccinated, or alternatively vaccinated children. It says at the very end here, these studies would be difficult to perform because of the likely differences among these 3 groups. So it's saying that you can't just test for autism in people that are vaccinated, unvaccinated, and different degrees of vaccinations, because having the vaccine doesn't seem to have any correlation on the autism or your ability to have it or get it or pass it on whatsoever. Conclusions. 20 studies have shown that neither thimerosal nor MMR vaccine causes autism. These studies have been performed in several countries by many different investigators who have employed a magnitude of statistical methods. So I'm going to go ahead and put all of these links here in the description below for just that quick part, but then we'll go on to something a little bit different. Something is spreading more viral than that of measles, and it's ignorance, and it's awful. And we're going to go over how that might be. So Facebook likes to engage the user, does it not? It's so nice to get that little red bubble, that ding engages you. You get dopamine, and the more they can get you to interact with the site, the better. And no matter the cost. That means it has to rile you up a little bit or make you angry. They might do it. So, they might have found that in the algorithm, and this isn't Facebook doing this is just the algorithm acting and showing users content that's engaging other users. This is propagating through not only Facebook but YouTube in such a way that it's engaging the users, it's getting people to react. And if you think about it, who's more engaged than a triggered mother? I don't mean that in an offensive way. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has personally come out and said vaccines are good, yet his site propagates the opposite. It's quite possible that there are nefarious things at play. Maybe the foreign actors that like to sway our political opinions are also trying to sow distrust in our science and our education, etc. And it's imperative that we think critically. That's pretty much all I've got so far. I didn't want to make this one too long, and I'll put all these in the description again below. That's the end of it today. Ignorance is spreading like crazy, so please spread this and share. You guys have a good one. Thanks again.